Hello, good morning, Sitaram, and welcome to another program in the series, Addiction and Recovery. I'm your host, Ram Naresh Dwarika, as usual on a Thursday morning, welcoming you to this, an interactive program. And this morning, I am going to be talking about something that is very, very important, and I'm sure you, our listeners, will be able to appreciate. Well, the topic this morning is the damage that is caused by drug addiction to the body. The damage that is caused by drug addiction to the body. And this program is being recorded. It will be replayed again on radio and TV Jagriti at 10 p.m. tonight. I'm also recording it, and it will be posted on YouTube and Facebook soon after the program this morning. And of course, you can place your comments there, or you can text to the number on your screens, or later on after the program, you can call the 671 number, and I'll be happy to give you any further information that you would like to get. So today, as I said, we are discussing a topic that is urgent, that is serious, and that is deeply relevant to families across Trinidad and Tobago. And that is the damage that is caused by drug addiction to the body. This is also, relevant to people who are using. You need to know what you're putting in your body and what can happen as a result of that. And last week I spoke about misconceptions, but many people think that addiction is simply a lack of willpower. Others believe that the damage only happens after many years. But science shows us something very different. Addiction is not just a social problem. It is not just a moral issue. It is a progressive medical condition that affects every major organ system in the body. In fact, everything it touches, from the lip right down to the other end, it damages and causes, it affects all the organs, all the major organs of the body system. So today we will look at how drugs affect the brain, how they damage the heart, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, the digestive system, the immune system, how it affects your mental health, and even how addiction accelerates aging and death as well. I'm sure you don't want to miss any of these things. It is very, very important. A lot of research went into this. So by the end of this program, you will understand why addiction is called a life-threatening disease. It is compared on the same scale with cancer and all the other terminal illnesses. Let us look at the damage it causes to the brain. Now, the brain is the primary target that alcohol affects. And that is one of the reasons we use it. And we want to change our mood, and it's called a mind-altering substance. So the first place we would look at is the brain. Every addictive substance, whether alcohol, cocaine, marijuana, heroin, ecstasy, methamphetamine, or prescription pills as well, affects one organ first, and that is the brain. That's the reason why we are so attracted to these drugs and medication, and that is what leads to dependence. So let us look at what the brain does. The brain controls thinking. It controls judgment. It controls the emotions. It also controls movement, breathing, the heart rate, and decision making. I want to go over that list. Sometimes we just take it for granted. The brain controls thinking. So if you can imagine a drug that is affecting our thinking, our judgment, our emotions, our movement, locomotion, that is, breathing as well, which is the root of life. it affects the heart rate, and it also affects our decision-making ability. So that drugs, they hijack the brain's reward system. Normally, when we do something healthy, like eat food, exercise, pray, or accomplish a goal, the brain releases dopamine. Now, dopamine makes us feel pleasure and satisfaction. That is the chemical in the brain when released. It doesn't matter what causes it to release, whether we won the match, whether we passed the exam, whether we received a compliment. The fact that we feel happy and we feel pleasurable and satisfied is because the brain released a little dopamine. But drugs can release 2 to 10 times the normal dopamine levels. So a drug like cocaine, for instance, the first time you use it, it is said almost all the dopamine you had saved up in your brain gets released. And you, that person who has never used cocaine, will never really be able to imagine what it feels like. And this is why you would have heard in that fraternity, these coke addicts, they keep looking for the head, that first head they had, that first experience. So over time, the brain reduces its natural dopamine production, because if you have a factory and you're producing a certain product, but then people can get the product cheaper and more readily available outside with least effort, eventually your factory will have to close down. The same thing happens with the brain. If you're taking something from outside to make you feel happy, the brain will stop producing dopamine, so that the person cannot feel normal pleasure now without taking the chemical or taking the drug. They feel depressed, they feel anxious because the body is not producing the dopamine that would normally make them feel pleasurable and satisfied. So normally where a compliment or encouragement or anything like that would make the person respond in a normal way. When they start using drugs, the reward center has changed. So, and this is why family members cannot understand how they're not being able to reach their relative, their sibling, or their brother, or the child, because then again it leads to depression, anxiety, and a feeling of emptiness. And this is why the person has to keep, because as the withdrawal symptoms, as they start feeling these feelings of depression, anxiety, and so on, the first thing their mind goes to is to get the drug and take it. And from experience, they know when they take the drug or they take the drink, the shakes go away, the physical symptoms of withdrawal go away. They're able to sleep. Now immediately their brain, nothing has changed, yet everything has changed. Their situation has not changed, but the way they perceive it has changed. They start to feel happy in a sad situation. So the only thing that feels normal is the drug. When they take the drug, just to be normal, they have to be taking the drug. So the brain imaging studies from institutions like the National Institute on Drug Abuse show that long-term drug use actually shrinks areas responsible for decision-making and impulse control. And this is why addicted individuals continue using despite the consequences. They make risky decisions, even they know that there's danger involved, that it is, not good for them to do it. And I'm sure you, the listening public, can imagine a lot of situations where people, their family break up, they see their family going apart and they can't seem to stop themselves. And it leads to separation, divorce, court matters, and all kind of thing. And this is why, they make risky decisions. And they get to the field, especially when you look at gambling. Person just lost the last penny, and yet they're going to borrow money to go back and try to win it back. In gambling, it is called chasing. In drinking alcohol, it is called the reviver. In Trinidad, some people call it revolver, you know. And then there's a struggle to stop even when they want to. At first, they'll promise people, and I did that for years. But then I stopped promising people, but secretly I will try to stop on my own and couldn't. So that addiction physically changes the brain. Your brain is not the same brain you had before you started to use drugs. Now let us look at the heart. Silent and sudden damage takes place here without you realizing it. The heart is being damaged. Many drugs damage the cardiovascular system. And as I say that, I immediately think about cigarette smoking and now vaping. You know, there was a time when people thought vaping was a good substitute for cigarette smoking. I am now seeing patients here who have almost reached to the point of death, passing away, going unconscious, have to be rushed to the hospital because of vaping, because vaping eventually leads to something called popcorn lungs, where your lung shrinks and become inefficient, and it will lead to death. So, as I said, many drugs damage the cardiovascular system. Stimulants like cocaine and methamphetamine, they cause increased heart rate. Think about for a minute. Since we're born, the first thing the doctors try to do is get our heart going. One slap, and we start screaming, and then our heart start going. But since that day till today, it has not stopped. Even when we are resting, our heart is still working. And when we use drugs, we put so much additional pressure on the heart. So by increasing the heart rate, especially things like cigarette, where the heart would have sent the blood one pass around the lung, and it would have picked up the adequate amount of oxygen for the body to take to the rest of the body. Now, because of the lung being compromised, the heart has to send the blood 2 and 3 times, which increases the heart rate. And this is what leads to hypertension. Well, of course, it leads to high blood pressure, what we call high blood pressure, hypertension. There's a narrowing of the blood vessels because of drug use, because of the plaque that is caused inside the blood vessels. And it eventually leads to irregular heartbeat. So your heart is beating out of timing, and your head is going out of timing as well. In fact, your whole body is eventually, you are going to go out of timing with what you should be doing. And we'll talk about that as we go along. So cocaine in particular can cause sudden heart attack. We have had incidents, recorded many incidents of people overdosing and going into cardiac arrest because of cocaine abuse. People can also go into cardiac arrest because of withdrawal symptoms from alcohol. When they start hallucinating, the heart starts racing to the point where it gives out, because you're seeing like people coming to kill you, animals chasing after you, horrid things coming to attack you, and the heart races to the point where people collapse and die. So that alcohol weakens the heart muscles over time, and this leads to what is called cardiomyopathy, which is, well, heart disease. There's also heart failure, as I mentioned, and eventually this could lead to strokes. In Trinidad and Tobago, we are already battling high rates of hypertension and diabetes. Drug use multiplies that risk. It just makes it worse. So that young men in their 20s and 30s are now dying suddenly because of stimulant-related cardiac arrest. If we had time, we'd have gone into the statistics. The heart was not designed to handle repeated chemical stress. Like I said earlier on, you know, from the time we were born, our heart, when we get scared, the heart steps up. If we run, we exercise, the heart is always stepping up to meet the challenges. But it could do without this extra challenge from drug addiction. Let us look at the lungs now. Breathing is under attack when we use drugs. Smoking substances, marijuana, crack cocaine, heroin, cigarettes, all of these damage the lungs. And as I say this, let us reflect on something. You can, a person can live without food for days. We can even live without water for days. We have, well, clothing and housing and so on, that is not as urgent as food and water, but yet we could do without it. Some people don't have a house or clothing. You could do without that for long periods of time. But think for a moment, how long can we do without air? After a minute, the body will start dying. What does that translate to? That translates to the fact that air is the most important thing to sustain life. This is why in Hindi, breath is the word for breath in Hindi is prana. Prana is also the same word for life. Breath is life. What is the first thing we do when we come in the world? We take a breath. What would be the last thing we do when we leave the world? We exhale. So life is just dependent on how many breaths we take. In yoga, actually, they estimate your life depending on, if you take long breaths at a time, it extends your life. If you keep breathing rapidly, like when you're anxious, angry, and all of that, you are shortening your life as well. So it is felt. So that chronic use of these substances, marijuana, crack cocaine, heroin, cigarettes, and so on, they lead to chronic bronchitis is one of them. Persistent cough, you have what you call the smoker's cough as a result of something called emphysema. Then there's a reduced lung capacity as a result, as I alluded to earlier on, which causes now the blood to have to go 2 and 3 times around the lungs. And then the exchange, the osmosis that takes place in the lung, that the lung transfers waste material to the blood, and from the blood, waste material is transferred into the lung and comes out as water vapor in the breath. And the blood picks up oxygen. But when we are smoking, there's a carbon buildup in these air sacs that prevent that transfer. And that is also going to make the heart have to send the blood 2 and 3 times to get to get the oxygen, sorry. There's also increased infections as a result of, when all of these air sacs are dying, gradually we set the basis for things like lung cancer and emphysema and all of that. There's also, well, of course, lung cancer. Marijuana smoke contains many of the same harmful chemicals found in tobacco smoke. And in fact, there are so many compounds in marijuana, I still don't think we have isolated all of them or know what all of them do. What we know that marijuana can mimic the symptoms of any other drug. It can act as a sedative. In some people, it can act as a stimulant. And in some others, it causes hallucinations. The same drug having the same effect, it can mimic the effects of cocaine and all the other mind-altering substances. And this is why, to my mind, it is more dangerous than all of them. So when drugs are injected, the risk changes. Infections can travel through the bloodstream and damage the lungs indirectly. Now, normally when we take drugs through the mouth by ingestion, the liver has a chance to detoxify it, neutralize it, and protect the body. But when we go to injecting drugs, like thank God in Trinidad, we still don't have that much of intravenous drug use. But in the more developed countries like California, New York, and Amsterdam, and all these places where now they're using heroin and all of that, there's an increased number of cases where people are injecting the drug. I actually had the opportunity in San Francisco to see what is called a needle exchange program, where the government decided to give drug addicts free needles and tourniquet and so on because it was the time when they were spreading AIDS because of infected needles. But that's another story. So that eventually, with these drugs, breathing becomes harder, energy decreases, and the body weakens because every cell in the body needs oxygen in order to function properly. And if you are reducing the supply, going to them, a lot of cells are going to die as well. So you're going to lose your muscle fibers, you're going to start suffering with all kind of, you know, peripheral neuropathy and all of that, nerve damage and so on. Let us look at the liver. There's a saying, life depends on the liver. The liver is like the customs department of the body, where everything we eat, the liver literally is the watchdog that protects us from viruses and bacteria and all kinds of things that are harmful, toxins and so on. The liver is really the body's chemical factory. Now, the liver detoxifies everything we consume. Detoxify means toxins are things that are not good for us. There's poisons. So it neutralizes these things. But alcohol is particularly destructive to the liver. It progresses in stages. And I am seeing young people in their 20s now showing up in my private practice here with fatty liver disease. It can also lead to something called alcoholic hepatitis. And of course, that popular one, cirrhosis, which really, really damages the liver. Cirrhosis is irreversible scarring of the liver. Now, once cirrhosis develops, the abdomen may swell. So you see alcoholics starting to develop a pot belly, we call it. There will be internal bleeding also that can occur because of cirrhosis. And there's a buildup of toxins in the brain as well, because the blood goes to everywhere. Once the blood has infection in it of any sort that escape the liver, it will carry to every cell of the body, including the brain. And as a result of that, death becomes a real possibility. And there's a tendency, even I remember when I go back into, you never believe that could happen with you when you're in your teenage or, as a young person in your 20s and so on. No, this is something that happens with old people. That is not true, not again. Mixing alcohol with medications, even things like paracetamol, dramatically increases liver failure risk. I want to repeat that. A lot of people, we have it, have a little knee pain or this pain or that pain. We go and we take the paracetamol. And then we go and we drink with that as well, not realizing that what we're doing there is making a potent combination of things that seriously damages the liver. In our culture where drinking is normalized at social events, many people underestimate how quickly they can develop liver damage, in a short space of time. All of us are different. Some people appear to be able to be more resilient, their body is fantastic. It develops just like it develops immunity to illness and so on. It is forced to develop coping strategies for things like alcohol. But eventually these will give away. Let us quickly look at the kidneys. The kidneys is really the filter of the body. It really, its main function is to keep the blood clean so that, all the waste that is picked up from all the cells of the body by the blood, it goes to the kidney and it is filtered. So that, but drug can cause dehydration. Alcohol in particular causes dehydration. When dehydration happens, what happens? You're taking out, you're not putting in enough water in the blood is getting thick. And if you have water going through a strainer, I'll explain this for the average folks listening, the water will go through very quickly. But if that water starts to get thick, let's suppose like syrup, it will not be able to go through this strainer. And when the heart is pumping hard, it will start damaging because the kidney is not made up with steel like a strainer, like a sieve that we use. It is very thin um, cells, material membranes, and the pressure with a thick blood is going to damage the kidney. And I've seen people very close to me who died as a result, young people who died because of kidney failure as a result of drinking. I'm sad to say that. Then it also causes a muscle breakdown in poisoning the kidneys. There's a big word here, rhabdomyolysis. Having trouble to pronounce that. But eventually, this leads to kidney failure. When your kidney fails, well, yeah, you will have to go for dialysis. If you're lucky, you may get a transplant. But now I know people who have been waiting up to 10 years to get a transplant, have to be on dialysis 2 and 3 times for the week. It is very costly. A dialysis treatment on the outside costs more than $1,000 for each treatment. So that stimulants and synthetic drugs increases body temperature and can cause severe dehydration, which again, as I said, thickens the blood. So that when the kidney fail, you have to have dialysis becomes absolutely necessary because if you don't clean the blood in a matter of days, you're going to have organ failure. All the other organs are going to start to die. The liver and the heart and you name it, pancreas and everything. Brain is going to die when the blood it starts becoming more and more toxic. And of course, by extension, life expectancy decreases. The quality of life changes drastically. Not many people on dialysis now are able to keep up with strenuous work and so on. Those who might have been fortunate to have a light, duty office work and so on, clerical, they're able to probably still manage. But people who were doing manual labor and so on, they have serious, serious challenges. Let us look at the digestive system. Addiction affects appetite and nutrition because, boy, I go back to when I was drinking, I have friends and myself would say, food has take up too much. When you eat, you don't feel the drink. So to really get the full effect of drinking, the best time to really drink is on an empty stomach. So you get the effect directly. The blood doesn't have to go through the whole digestive system. As soon as they hit the stomach, it goes through the stomach walls into the bloodstream. So that some drugs suppress appetite, and then others cause vomiting as well. So even when you eat, you throw it out back. So the net result is that you start becoming malnourished. Malnutrition, all the medicine, all the muscle, everything. In fact, our whole body was produced from what happens in the digestive system. The breast milk and the baby formula and all of that is what made our bodies. And this is why it is important that we keep the abdomen clean and well functional because everything the body needs for its survival, not only for physical health, but for mental health, for psychological well-being and everything, is produced in the stomach. And if you're not eating the right foods, you're going to be trouble. There's a saying, if you don't eat food as medicine, then you'll have to eat medicine as food. So alcohol irritates the stomach lining. It's from the lips is blistered with alcohol. The throat, you have the esophagus, the throat being affected, the stomach being affected by things like gastritis. And I remember having a bout of that. When my first son was born, I became so elated. I had to go and celebrate, man. And that's a long story. I ended up in the hospital with gastritis because I was drinking on an empty stomach for the whole day and without chaser because we went down in the swamp, and we forgot to carry any chaser. So drinking straight alcohol. Of course, it causes ulcers when you have a stomach full of alcohol and you go to sleep in the night. The alcohol is blistering and shredding the stomach, and it eventually leads to bleeding because the next day when you're vomiting, I know a lot of people, I myself had that experience. You go and you're retching and vomiting, and next thing you can tear your stomach. And if it starts to bleed, that is sudden death. Your stomach will start leaking into your abdominal cavity, and you have something called septicemia, almost impossible to treat. Once you reach to be getting septicemia, that is infection all inside the abdominal cavity, call the priest because it's time to leave the world. And of course, it would lead to pancreatitis, that is inflammation of the pancreas. This is common in heavy alcohol users and is extremely painful and dangerous. And I have had very close relative who did not drink heavy. He was not an alcoholic, but died from pancreatitis. Malnutrition weakens the entire body. The addicted person may look thin, pale, and exhausted. You can actually see them, you see the eyes starting to turn yellow with jaundice and all of that. Now, let us look at what did these drugs do to the immune system. Drug use weakens the immune system. This leads to frequent infections, always sick, slow wound healing. You get a cut. Well, especially if you're hypertensive and diabetic, that just doubles and triples your healing time. Takes a long time for it to get, and a lot of people have lost, their fingers and toes as a result of this. Increased risk of tuberculosis. When I was director at Piparo Empowerment Center and when I worked at Cora Hospital, all our patients, we saw a very high incidence of tuberculosis, TB, as I call it. Some people call it consumption in the old days. And this is because people who use drugs expose themselves to a lot of risky behavior and they don't protect themselves from these things. And in that fraternity of drug users, there's a high prevalence of tuberculosis because they don't go seek treatment and take the medication and make sure that they are cured and all of that. And they keep spreading it to one another. And TB is a highly infectious disease. It can cause by droplet infection. You're just talking to a person with TB, let alone being intimately involved with them. You're surely going to pick it up. And this is why when that is a screening that must be done before you admit anyone into treatment because they can infect your entire population. Then there's an increased vulnerability to viruses. Everything passing, you pick it up because your immune system become compromised as a result of the drug use. Now, injection drug use increases the risk of HIV. I referred to that earlier on. Hepatitis B and hepatitis C. These are liver diseases that are very difficult to treat and cure. and can lead, and they can lead to fatality. They can cause death. These infections further damage the liver and the immune system. Let us look at mental health. I had listed all of these before. Addiction does not only cause physical harm, but it causes depression. And a lot of people now go to the psychiatrist and are prescribed antidepressants. But then when they develop tolerance, the 2 milligram and the 5 milligram now working, they start supplementing it with alcohol. And that is a prescription for death, because whoever made the prescription pill never tested it on drunk people, so that it leads to a lot of overdose. And when a person is drunk and they go to the medicine cabinet, they can't remember if they took one or two or how many. And there's a lot of people who are, and they didn't even know if they took it or they didn't take it. And drugs take a little while to take effect. But alcoholics and drug addicts are people who have a difficulty postponing gratification. They want to feel good and want to feel good right now. So they're not even waiting for the effect. They will double up on the dose, and they will cause severe damage as a result to their liver and all the organs, if not causing death to themselves. Then again, as I said, it causes depression, it causes anxiety disorders, it causes paranoia. Those who are familiar with cocaine addicts and so on, you'll see in withdrawal or under the influence, the kind of crazy things they do. They start seeing green people coming. They start looking for a rock in the ground, as though the cocaine rock got misplaced. They start hiding, thinking the police is coming for them. And then eventually, if you visit St. Anne's Hospital here, or Ward 1 in San Fernando, on any day, I feel pretty certain you are sure to see someone who is in there because of a drug-induced psychosis. And of course, in the long run, it causes memory problems, because every time you drink or use any drug and you had a blackout, that is, you can't remember what happened, that is a sure sign that your brain is being damaged. Next day, you can't remember it. So methamphetamine and cocaine can cause long-lasting paranoia and hallucinations, so that sometimes you go to the mental hospital and you don't come out. There are people who are permanently there. Alcohol withdrawal can cause seizures and delirium tremens. Delirium tremens is when you start hallucinating and seeing and hearing things that are not there. You feel like things crawling on your skin. So that addiction increases suicide risk significantly. There's a lot of people who, under the influence of drugs, have committed suicide or killed other people. And then there are a lot of people who, coming out of it in withdrawal, became so depressed, so disoriented that they committed suicide. The brain becomes trapped in a cycle of craving, shame, and relapse. And this I would speak about more at another time, but I've seen people repeatedly trying, I know they're trying to stay sober, but because of the craving and the shame associated, they refuse to seek help, and they keep relapsing all the time. The only way to do this is you have to come out and admit, look, I can't use this drug, and get as much help as you can from your therapist, from your treatment facilities available, from AA and NA, and from your family. This is critical. So let us look at, I also mentioned premature aging and death. And a lot of people, even people who don't use drugs, we all seem to think we are always going to be here. Everybody else will die, but we will not. But chronic drug users often look older than their age. And that is something I want you all who are listening today to look around and see. You have some young people who grew up in front of you as little children, and they're looking older than you now. They grow a beard, of course. They stop taking care of their teeth. They have missing tooth. They're unkempt. They're not taking a trim or bath and all of that. And of course, the clothes are tattered. But a lot of those people you see on the streets, Skid Row, drunks and drug addicts, who look very, very old. I have seen videos made of people who went and took these people off the streets, gave them a bath, groomed their hair and shaved their beard and give them new clothes and of course immediately they look transformed. But these same people I have seen go to AA meeting, come for treatment. When you look at them just a few months after, you hardly can ever recognize this was the same person. Albeit I have seen people who, I have friends myself who used to drink with me who were younger than me, and they're nowhere around because they didn't stop drinking. I'm happy to say I'm 78, going into 79, and I'm still able to do most of the things I've always been able to do. I don't have any major illnesses, and thank God. It is because now, as I mentioned earlier on, I'm keeping my intestines healthy. I'm eating the right foods. I am, exercising, taking a rest, and maintaining a healthy lifestyle. These are the things that will extend your life. And again, as I say this, it doesn't really matter the amount of years in your life. What really matters is the amount of life in your years. It doesn't matter, whether you live to be 100, but if you were, just stumbling along for the last 50 years and, becoming a burden to everybody else because of your illness and your self-induced illness, if I may say so, that is no kind of life. So chronic drug users often look older. And why? Why? Because addiction dehydrates the skin. People who using drugs, they don't really cream their skin, they don't bathe regularly, they don't take, it dehydrates, it disrupts sleep. Even normal people, if you start having difficulty to sleep, you're not getting enough rest, you're going to age in a very quick time, And you could look around. In fact, you don't have to be a doctor or professional. People just look at a friend or, hey, what's happening, boy? How are you looking? So relatives who knew you from birth are quickly able to tell, something and not looking right with you. It was, of course, when you're using drugs, as I said earlier on, you don't pay attention to your nutrition. You're not eating the right thing. There's teeth decay. The skin deteriorates, and your energy levels decline because of your lung capacity being diminished, your liver not handling your toxins very well, your stomach and all of that is now not working properly. You're not putting the right fuel in your body. So how are you going to run the races? If you put kerosene in your car, it ain't going to run very far. Now, overdose is now a global crisis. According to data supported by the World Health Organization, millions worldwide suffer preventable health consequences from substance use disorders each year. And I want to stress that this is something that could be prevented. You understand? It is self-induced, self-inflicted. Many deaths occur accidentally from overdose. People suffer with stroke, heart attack, accidents while intoxicated. And that is a whole long topic again. The amount of road traffic accidents as a result of drinking and drug use. Even marijuana use impairs your judgment. You're not able to judge distances well, and you run into people, you run off the road, and okay, you drop asleep behind the steering. So that addiction shortens lifespan dramatically. And finally, let me talk about, can the body recover? Well, here is the hopeful message. The body has an incredible ability to heal if the substance use stops early enough. a lot of the organs that I spoke of earlier on can heal if you stop using drugs. So that within 24 hours, blood pressure may begin to stabilize again. Just after 24 hours of stopping the use of drugs, your body is always trying to move to what is called stasis. In a few weeks, the brain chemistry starts improving again. It will start adjusting, trying to increase the dopamine production. And in months, the liver function may improve if cirrhosis has not set in. And I'm saying that pointedly, you have to be mindful that you don't start developing, because when it becomes cirrhotic, it can't heal. That part becomes like a dead sponge or dry, stop and stretch rubber, as we call it. 1 year after this cessation of drug use, heart disease risk drops significantly in those who stop heavy drinking or smoking, so that recovery is possible. But delay increases permanent damage. So finally, again, I want to reiterate that addiction is not glamorous. To smoke that cigarette, take that drink, and the advertisement keep promoting it. This is the way to let your hair down. This is the way to get to impress the girl. Smoking this brand and all that nonsense. It is not harmless. Even the vape and all of those things. One drink of alcohol is still going to cause damage. In spite of a lot of people have come up with all kind of excuses that a tablespoon of alcohol is good. Maybe, but who drinks a tablespoon of alcohol and stop? Nobody I know, not me. It is not just a phase. A lot of people say, he going through a phase, man, give him a chance. No, 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 no. He may not come out of that phase. Because I tell young people, if you don't want to go in a certain direction, don't even look that way. Because if you look that way, you may see something to attract you. So that, yes, while not everybody who drink will become alcoholic, but everybody who became alcoholic, they started with that first drink. You understand? So that it is a disease that attacks, again, let me remind you, it attacks the brain, the heart, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, the immune system, and the mind. But recovery is real. And treatment works. I know. Yeah, I know a lot of people have relapsed a few times because the truth is they never really gave the program a try. They never went to AA, never want to go, they never want to seek help, they want to do it on their own. Well, treatment works and support works. It is important that we support these people, but to support them, we have to understand what they're going through, and that is what this program is about. Spiritual growth works. You'll hear almost everyone in Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or Gamblers Anonymous, they're all saying, they start their contributions by saying, but for the grace of God, they are sober today, or that they are drug-free. So, yes, God works. And medical care also works. But as I say this with a word of caution, that you can't use drugs to treat drug addiction generally. It could be used in the initial stages, but with a plan, an exit plan, so that the person don't stop using alcohol and become dependent on sleeping pills. And I'm seeing too much of that. Now, if you or someone you love is struggling, seek help early. Like any other disease, if you catch it early, you can prevent yourself of years of misery and damage and hurt to your family and separation. And the body can heal, the brain can also recover, and lives can be restored. I've seen families get back together and prosper. I've seen young people change their way of life, went back to school. Indeed, I did that myself. When I stopped drinking, I went back to school, and that's how and why I'm here doing what I'm doing today. So Again, I want to thank all of you who have stayed with the program. I appreciate your comments and compliments. I went to my barber and I met a guy from the village and he was so much in praise. It feels good that people are recognizing your work and appreciating and, are influenced by. And I want to let you all know this program, as I said at the beginning, is being recorded. It is also going to be rebroadcast on radio and TV Jagriti at 10 p.m. tonight. For those of you who couldn't stay for the whole program or who would like to, you can refer this. You can use this program as a resource material to send to anyone. Send the YouTube link or the Facebook link to someone out there who you believe can benefit. Indeed, after the end of the program, I send it out to a lot of groups that I'm associated with and to individual members who are in recovery and family members and so on, hoping that, I'm planting seeds of hope. And as I say this, I want to thank Radio and TV Jagriti from its very inception to have apportioned this part of the program for this community service. I want to thank the CEO, Mr. Vijay Maharaj. I also read his column in the papers every day, and I want to thank the operators at the station. Sometimes we have challenges, but they are there all the time. And I'm really broadcasting this program from my office where in Chaguanas, City City, where I live. And they rebroadcast it and post it as well. So it's all in an effort to educate our brothers and sisters in Trinidad and Tobago and worldwide about this scourge that is alcoholism and to let you know there is hope. And if anybody would like to know anything more about this program, feel free to call me at the numbers on your screen, 671-3040, or text me at 768-5925, and I'll be only too happy to oblige and to answer your queries or your questions. So I want to thank those of you who stayed with the program this morning and to remind you again, next week, Thursday at 9 a.m., we'll be back again with another program in the series, Addiction and Recovery. Thank you and have a good day now.